Hello. Good afternoon or morning, wherever you happen to be. Um, I'm Andrea Hill, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to the latest installation of MJSA's webinar series. We've got about 1 minute to go, but I can see several of you are logged in, so let's start with a little housekeeping. If you haven't joined us before, there's a chat box, usually to the right of your screen, unless you're coming in through a mobile device, then it depends. Could you go to that chat box and just let me know if you can see me and hear me okay? Let's start there. And if you see my eyes darting all over the place, it's because I'm looking at one of multiple screens to see your responses. So yes and yes, you can see me and hear me. Let's get some responses from a couple of other people. If you're having a hard time getting a good signal, I would recommend using the Chrome browser for this webinar system or Firefox. Those are the two best browsers for receiving this and honestly for just about everything. All right, it looks like it's working. All right, so I'm going to expand these slides and let's just jump right in because we have a lot of content to cover today. So let me see from the notes. Did the slides load up okay for you? Can you see the first slide? Also, I will be taking questions at the end of the session. Sometimes if I see a question pop up that I can, first of all, if I notice it in the notes, and if I have time in real time, I will answer questions. But there is a question and answer area, usually below the screen if you're on a desktop, definitely below the screen if you're on a mobile device. Enter the questions there as you think about them so you don't have to worry about waiting till the very end. And I'll be glad to answer those questions before we close today. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, we are talking about email and new strategies for digital marketing. And let's just dive right in. So, if you've been emailing for a while, then you've probably noticed that email is suffering from some fatigue as a medium. So, does that mean you should give up on email? No, definitely not. Email continues to produce the highest ROI of all digital marketing. It's better than social, it's better than paid advertising. And it's because email's low cost coupled with its consistent response rates means you're still wise to include email and even prioritize email at the top of your list of marketing activities. But you do need to keep up with the times. Maximizing your email results requires exercising all of the email skills. And we're going to talk through the most important of those skills today. So let's get started. In any skill, the basics always matter. So we're going to spend a few minutes on the basics just to make sure everyone shares a similar understanding of email marketing. And for that, we're going to start with the numbers. So the numbers for email marketing look abysmal until you understand marketing statistics in general. I'll give you an example. In the 1980s and early 1990s, I ran a direct marketing catalog company. We mailed 6 million 32-page catalogs every 6 weeks. That's 48 million catalogs per year. And of those 48 million catalogs, 47,040,000 of them went into the garbage can without ever producing an order. And yes, I am now an avid environmental activist, but I will never be able to atone for that much paper waste. But from a numbers standpoint, that was a profitable result because direct marketing has always made a lot of money on less than 2% response rates. And what I've noticed as I've moved from direct marketing in paper and print to direct marketing in digital is that the numbers are still incredibly similar. So let's talk about some of these numbers. We'll start with open rates. Most people think that there's a good open rate that they're supposed to be targeting. But the truth is that open rates differ by industry. They differ between B2B and B2C, and they differ between mobile and desktop devices. In fact, open rates are all over the board. If you average all of those open rates across all industries and devices, because they tend to come in, well, between 15% and 22%, the average would be about 17.92%. They are actually a little bit lower than that in general in the jewelry industry. The next statistic we're going to talk about is click-through rates. Click-through rates are the rate of people who click on something, anything in your email. A click-through rate is also dependent on industry, category, and device, and they can range from 1 to 5%, but we'll work with an average click-through rate of about 2.5% for our example here. Then there's another rate, which is called the click-to-open rate, or CTOR. This is a really critical metric to track. It's even more important than your open rate. The CTOR is a measure of the people who opened your email, what percentage of them clicked on something. That's a much more important indicator of effectiveness because it's saying of all the people who open the email, how many actually take action. And your sale rate is largely based on your CTOR, not your CTR. So the click-through rate, it's an interesting metric, but if you want to predict how many people are going to buy something based on an email that you send out, you would say, well, what's my open rate? Figure, somewhere between, for the jewelry industry, 15.9 and 17.9% are good open rates. And then you would say, of that, what's my click to open rate? And of that, you can expect to do anywhere, depending on price point, of 0.5% to 1.5% sale rate. The lower your price point, the higher the sale rate is going to be, because obviously for more expensive things, people need to spend a lot more time thinking about it. The more expensive it is, the more likely you are to end up at about 0.5% sale rate. So now let's look at what happens when we take that CTOR, that click to open rate, up from 25% to 40%. So in the previous screen, we had a sale rate of 7 on a mailing of 10,000 and of no sales on a mailing of 800. But when you take that CTOR up to 40%, you could actually do 11 sales on a 10,000 mailing or 1 sale on 800 if your sale rate was at around 1.5%. So moving the click to open rate needle is your goal with email marketing. If that's the one thing you take out of these last 2 slides, that's the point. You want to get more clicks from the people who open your email. That's the most important thing you can do. But still, the numbers are very incremental. Like I said, for higher priced items like, high-end jewelry, you can expect to have sales of less than 0.5% of total mails. You can still make money doing that because email is extremely economical, but you have to work at it. It's also important to remember that you aren't just doing email for the direct sales impact. Those sales should always be your ultimate goal. Email is very useful for building your brand, strengthening your relationship with customers, and providing them with meaningful information. If the only thing you do with email is sell, 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 then your numbers are definitely going to be lower than the numbers I'm showing you here. So the first thing to take away from these 2 slides is that open rates, people will boast, oh, I have a 40% open rate. Oh, I have a 35% open rate. People did achieve open rates like that 10 years ago when the sheer volume of email was much lower. So get your mind wrapped around reasonable open rates. And also remember that the thing you're working on is improving email effectiveness, because the higher your click to open rate is, the higher your sales will be. And that's the focus of the rest of this presentation, is talking about the things that drive the click to open rate. This is also why you need to build a really large email list, because the more you can email and the better you do it, the more likely you are to generate orders. So we've been doing email as a marketing device long enough that we have good science, lots of good science on how to improve it. So let's take a look at some of the things you can do to improve your email marketing effectiveness. The first thing we're going to talk about is subject lines. Your subject line is one of the most important parts of your email. Subject lines may seem like a really small part of your message, but they're the very first impression you make on your email recipients. And subject line is definitely the key to standing out in a crowded inbox. And if you think about your own email, inboxes are very crowded. So if you want your email content to be opened and read and clicked, you need to start with a strong subject line. And these are the most important suggestions for writing subject lines. The first one is a fairly new development, partly because it wasn't easy to put emojis in subject lines in earlier email marketing systems. But when you put emojis in subject lines, it just grabs the eye. It's a graphical element. If you think about an email inbox, it's just a bunch of lines of subject lines, right? And the emojis give you a graphical element that grabs the eye. People are testing emojis and seeing that a subject line with an emoji in it compared to the same subject line without an emoji in it, the one with the emoji in it will get a 56% higher open rate than the one without the emoji. The next thing you want to do is convey a sense of urgency. Anything you can do to give people a sense of timing is important. 2 weeks left, 1 day left, only going on until such and such date. Those are the kinds of things that convey a sense of urgency. You don't want to do it all the time, or you're going to be the boy who cried wolf emailer, but it is important. Stoking curiosity is a really good way to write a subject line. Asking questions is a big part of that. Subject lines that are questions perform better than subject lines that aren't. Make interesting offers if you're offering a sale or you're offering a coupon or you have an event, anytime you can make an interesting offer in a subject line, people will respond to it. Personalize your subject lines. Not all of the email systems will allow you to do this yet, but many of the good ones will, so that you can have the subject line say, Deborah, and then ask her a question or ask a question, Deborah, question mark. So anytime you can personalize the subject line, do drop a name. If your jewelry was recently seen on a celebrity, that's a guaranteed way to get people to at least be curious. But anytime you can drop a name that's recognizable, and always, this is relating to names, but it's not about the subject line as much as it is about the sender, which shows up right next to the subject line. Use a known sender name. Don't ever send email from info@andreahill.org because nobody cares about that. It needs to come from Andrea Hill at andreahill.org. So use a known sender name and then keep all your subject lines short and sweet. So these are some of the most important tips for subject lines, but I also have a resource for you. So if you jot this, that's a URL. So http://works.me/subject. That is a link to a free subject line guide from HubSpot, and it will give you a ton of great ideas for what works in subject lines. And you will be getting a recording of this by the end of today, usually. So if you didn't jot that down, you will get access to it later. Now let's talk about email testing. Of course, as soon as I say the phrase A/B split testing, people who don't consider themselves to be mathematical or scientific tend to get a glazed look on their faces. But hang in there with me because it's easier and more practical than you may realize. A/B testing is the method for figuring out the best subject line or content or images for your email. It takes a little bit of time to do because for each email you want to send, you have to create 2 different versions or 3 different versions. It's not always A/B split testing. Sometimes it's ABC split testing. So you have to plan for the different versions that you're going to test, and then you need to monitor the responses. So it takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to set up an A/B split testing email in this session because it depends on which system you use. MailChimp does it differently than Constant Contact. They both do it differently than Aweber. Those 3 do it differently than Greenrope, and on and on. There are just so many systems. So every system is going to handle the setup of a split test differently. What I am going to tell you is the basic rules and results of split testing. So the first rule is that you can only change one variable at a time. So a variable would be, I'm testing my images, or I'm testing colors, or I'm testing subject lines. Why just one variable? Because if you change more than one thing at a time in a test, you won't know which of those things was responsible for the result. So if you're testing subject lines, you're going to do two identical emails with two or three different subject lines. And what you want to see is if one subject line performs better than the others. Or you're going to do the same exact email content and pictures, but you will change the layout. So this is the basics of split testing, is that you change one variable at a time. So this is an example of testing to see which color gives you a better result. And color can be very compelling in email click-through rates or CTORs. Or you could test two different call to action buttons to see if one shape or position performs better than the other. Hopefully, this is also helping you think about the fact that what may seem to be a very simple element, like the shape of a CTA button, can have significant impact on driving reader behavior. So it's very possible that more people would respond to one of these subscribe now shapes than the other. Now, this is an example of a no-no. It's a bad test because there's no way to know if the image or the headline made a difference in this test. You might test two different photographs in one test and then two different headlines in another test. Of course, after you've tested all the variables, if you wanted to test to see if different combinations have a different impact, you could. I mean, it's possible that the combination of headline and photo could drive different behavior, but that's a much later test. It's after you've compiled all the results of testing each variable alone first. And it's the kind of deep, iterative testing that most small business owners don't have time or data background to do. So you will see if you're doing online research about testing, you're going to see pictures like the one I'm showing on the screen now. And I want you to know that's bad advice unless you're doing this as, the 15th or 20th test of a given email. For most small business owners, just make sure you're testing only one variable at a time and make your emails incrementally better that way. So a few last thoughts on testing. First, you don't have to test everything every time. You can test and learn a little bit at a time. And over time, you will build knowledge about what works and what doesn't for your audience. So some people find asking questions in subject lines is powerful. And other people will say, yeah, that never works for us. We do questions in our subject lines and nobody seems to care. So some of it has to do with your particular audience. So, when you do a bit of split testing and you find out questions don't work, then after a while, I'm not going to use questions anymore. I'll do something different. So you just need to test and learn a little bit at a time and build your knowledge base. The second thing is that you don't need to send the entire list the first time. So if you have a list of 3,000 subscribers and you want to test two different subject lines, don't just split the list into 1,500 get subject line A and 1,500 get subject line B. Your goal is to make sure that that email campaign is as productive as possible. So maybe you would just take the first 500 names on your list and split and see which subject line performed better. Then you would send the rest of the list, the other 2,500 people, whichever one of those two emails won the test. Or you could even do another test to another 10% of the list and see if you can come up with an even stronger subject line. Or maybe you're going to test a picture in that next group. And then once you've got your best subject line and your best picture, then you email to the rest of the list. But don't make yourself crazy with this. You're not a marketing analytics company. So do a little more testing when you have the time or when the stakes are really high. Do a little less testing when you don't have the time, but always test something. Now let's talk about one of the biggest mistakes people make, which is thinking they have to send something new every time they send out an email. You don't. You can take advantage of all the hard work you've done already and keep tweaking individual elements to figure out how to improve the email delivery. So never underestimate the value of repeating things. This is true for your social media as well. So just because you remember that you sent the email doesn't mean your customers do. Remember, this is a sad fact, but it's true. So if you sent an email to 1,000 people and only 179 people opened it, and that's your 17.92% open rate right there. Well, that means the other 821 recipients probably don't even remember it. So send it again, but this time tweak something else and test it. I did this just yesterday with the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference email. We did a resend to all the people who hadn't opened the email 3 days before. Now, for the people who did open the email 3 days before, we didn't include them in that mailing. We did something else for them. They have a higher level of interest. So feel free to repeat things. If you haven't hung out with your inner nerd in a while, then this is the time to do it. There can be a lot of fun in testing and discovering and learning. You might need to spend a little bit of time at first learning how to set up these A/B tests in your email system. But all of the good email systems like MailChimp, Constant Contact, Greenrope, HubSpot, eWeber, whatever, Aweber, they all have good instructions in them for how to set up the A/B test. So, and it's not rocket science. This is basic instructions. So just spend a little bit of time learning how to do the setups in your email system. And once you've figured that out, you really are going to enjoy how much you learn from the process. And what you'll love even more is that your email results will start improving when you start doing better email. The mediums we market in have changed from TV and radio and print to digital, like social and websites and search. But the underlying discipline of marketing has not changed. Marketing always has been and always will be about targeting and relevance. And you have to get the targeting right in order to be more relevant. But we're going to talk about relevance first. So the main thing you need to do is make sure your messages are relevant to your subscribers. A recent study by Forrester Research, which produces some of the best marketing research in the world, found that irrelevance is the number one reason that people cited for unsubscribing from email lists. 75% of respondents said they're turned off by irrelevant messages, and a very high percentage of those said they unsubscribe if they get more than one. So at best, your subscribers will ignore an email that's irrelevant. But at worst, they're going to unsubscribe from your list and you never get a chance to speak to them again. So unless they resubscribe, which does happen, but at a very low rate. So you need to be relevant. When you're writing an email, think about the things that caused your subscribers to sign up in the first place. And then ask yourself some important questions about those subscribers. For instance, how does the message I'm writing relate to the subscribers on my list? What value does this email bring my subscribers? Does the message help my subscribers solve a problem or feed their interest? Or does it just attempt to sell them something? So relevance is critical to email success. You can write an email with grammatical errors. I'm not recommending you do this, by the way, but you could write an email with grammatical errors that's, not particularly great language. But if it's relevant, people will read it and respond to it. On the other hand, if you write the most beautifully copywritten, grammatically perfect, everything spelled perfectly email, okay, which of course you should try to do every single time, but if it's not relevant, it won't matter. So relevance is the most important ingredient in email. That's the message I'm trying to convey here. I'm not saying it's okay to spell things wrong, and I'm not saying it's okay to be grammatically incorrect, but I am saying if you're not relevant, getting those other things right just doesn't matter. Of course, if you only have a big list, one big one-size-fits-all list, then you can't target the right messages to the right readers. You can only speak to big, broad lists in big, broad ways, and that's not sufficient. So to target, you need more than one big list. You should have lists, plural, and those lists should be segmented according to interests or customer type or customer level. In fact, the right segments for your list will be different from the right segments for a competitor's list. And one person may belong to multiple lists within your overall email marketing database, but some people will only belong to one list. And this is how you get more relevant. So a designer may have list segments for people who buy bridal and for people who buy fashion and for men who buy gifts. Those may be examples of list segments for one designer. A jewelry store may have list segments for people in a birthday club, and another list for people who like color gemstones, and another list for people who gravitate to estate jewelry. A jewelry brand may break its list segments into small independent retails, and then independent chains, and then large chains. Or they may have lists for the different collections that people buy from. The best possible way to segment your list is according to interests of your customer base and the things that you have to sell different groups of people. And if you accomplish that by being a smart collector of email addresses, which we're going to discuss in the next section of today's presentation, then you're really starting to do everything right when it comes to email marketing. Timing. You are going to get a lot of advice and hear a lot of opinions on this topic, but the truth about timing is it depends. For instance, is it correct that Tuesdays are the best day to send email? Yeah, Tuesdays are still the best day. Tuesdays are a lot better than Sundays, and they're quite a bit better than Mondays, but they're only marginally better than Wednesdays and Thursdays. So, basically the guidance is email in the middle of the week. Now, because everybody's reading this Tuesdays are marginally better data, which is accurate, I tend to tell my clients to email on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Why? Because there's not so much crowding in the inbox. When we test sending in the middle of the week, we don't see much difference between them. So broad email statistics say that Tuesdays are marginally better, but anything in the middle of the week works. Now, time of day and day of the week can be very dependent on industry and also device. Consumers tend to respond to email throughout the week and at all hours of the day. So if you're doing consumer email, it will look a little different than business to business email. Also, if you're doing an offer for a reasonably priced item, that's consumer directed, you can get great results by targeting people who are on mobile devices on the weekend. Or mobile devices will often yield, even in business to business, great results extremely early in the morning, like 5:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. Why? Because so many people tend to wake up, pick up their mobile device, and look at their email. So for timing of email, my best advice is to do the testing and see what works for you, because your audience is going to be different than somebody else's audience. I don't believe in hard and fast rules for timing of email. And anytime somebody tells you this works best or that works best, it's either just an opinion based on assumption, or it's based on testing, but of their own list. They can't represent for you what your own list will do. You need to test that and find out for yourself. So that was a lot of basics. And for some of you, that may not seem like basics. That may seem more advanced. When I start talking about doing A/B split testing, people say that's not basic. But the truth is that that is the baseline of what you need to do if you want your email marketing to be successful, that you need to do some testing and tweak and refine. Now we're going to move on to how you take your basic email marketing to the next level. You may have heard the term inbound marketing before, and what we're talking about in this next section takes into account more of inbound marketing. So inbound marketing is the practice of attracting customers by creating valuable content and experiences on your social media, on your website. If your website's just functioning like a plain old billboard or a postcard that happens to be digital, it's not going to be doing enough for you. So you need to be creating these information and experiences relevant to your brand and what you sell, and attract people to sign up to your email list through those experiences. Outbound marketing would be a typical email blast. Email blasts interrupt the audience with content they may or may not want. But inbound marketing attracts them through SEO to your website or through social to your website to a sign up form. And it helps them form connections that the customer is interested in. So you get much higher quality out of a customer who came to you because of information that you shared on social or your website than you do from just going out and blasting people with a generic email. In fact, if what we're talking about today is email 5.0, email blasts are way back at email 1.0. There's very rarely a good reason to do an email blast anymore. And by that, I mean just blasting your whole list. So let's talk about collecting these email addresses. You should look at email addresses as if they are money. Each email address is potentially worth sales to you. And just like you wouldn't leave your money laying around on the floor or under the bed or fluttering out of your pockets while you walk down the street, your email addresses need to be tended to as well. They need to be collected and sorted and constantly updated. I know a lot of people are reluctant to ask for email addresses. Everyone's afraid, oh, I'll be a nuisance. Nobody wants email. I've noticed that this typically is a worry for someone who doesn't like giving out her own email address. Now, none of us appreciate all the spam we get in our inboxes, but most people are still willing to give an email address in exchange for something of value. So the question is, based on your brand, what can you offer in email on an ongoing basis that represents value to the customer? What kinds of things do you talk about with your customers that they find incredibly interesting, that they want to hear more about? You have knowledge about the product that you make and sell and about your brand that is interesting to some people. That's that valuable content. So you need to do the work of providing something of value in your email communications, and then you'll start to steadily build your list. So where are you going to collect these email addresses? Well, every person you meet at a trade or a retail event is a potential source of an email address. Anyone who emails you or calls you looking for information. Most people don't have their Microsoft or, like Outlook or Gmail integrated with their email marketing system. So make sure you move those email addresses over into the marketing system. Offering live chat on your website is a great way to collect email addresses. And again, if you're using a more modern website with a modern email system, that you can make those chat buttons, the chat pops up and it says, how can we help you today? And maybe you're sitting at your desk, so you're monitoring. Well, that person should still be entering an email address before you get the message that somebody's waiting to talk to you. And if you're away from your desk, you can actually set those to say, hey, I'm away from my desk right now, but we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And you're getting the email address there. Call to action buttons should exist on every page of your website. And different pages are about different topics. So, of course, people signing up on different pages should go to different lists, right? You can use pop-ups to invite signups. Those pop-ups may appear after the visitor has been on your web page for a certain number of seconds. You can have pop-ups slide in from the side, scroll up from the bottom. The only thing you don't want to do is make that pop-up just blast the middle of the entire page and obliterate what the customer's looking for. Customers hate those kinds of pop-ups. So make sure that you create pop-ups that invite the customer to share an email address without interrupting what she's trying to do, because that's just rude. Surveys and quizzes are a great way to collect email addresses. And you can do a lot of fun stuff with jewelry and surveys and quizzes, asking, which design, this or that, which color do you prefer? What gemstone are you? And there are just so many things when you're selling jewelry. And as a business to business device, it's still useful. You can still create quizzes and surveys that are meaningful and useful to your business audience. And then social media invitations to sign up for your email list are also a very valid way to collect email addresses. Or bringing people to a landing page, and then on that landing page, ask them for an email address. So you need to start collecting and managing emails email addresses as if they are money, because they are. And remember, you're not just collecting email addresses, you are building lists. So think about email addresses in terms of which list or lists that recipient will land on. So an email address collected on a bridal page could easily go to a different list than an email address collected on a fashion page. So they navigated to that page for a reason. They were interested. So now catch their email address and associate it with a list that speaks to that level of interest. An email address collected on a custom jewelry page could go to a different list than an email address collected on a sale promotion. So always correlate your sign up pages and sign up activities with lists, and then you'll have the insight that you need to send relevant emails later. Now, when you receive an email address, it's critical that you send a welcome email. Welcome emails have incredibly high success rates. If you think that the average read rate is somewhere between 15 and 22%, then the average welcome email read rate is 34%. And that's across all industries too, so it's an average. Your welcome email should be set up as an automatic email. So you want it to trigger to run anytime a new email address enters the database. And it should include the following elements. So first of all, it needs to be sent immediately. Welcome emails work really well because you're sending them when the subscriber's interest is at its highest. If you wait even a few days, their enthusiasm has probably waned or they've forgotten about you altogether, and that will result in lower engagement rates. Now, it's not true that all you need to collect is an email address. There is something true. It's true that the more information you ask people for on an email form, the less likely they are to complete it. So if you ask someone for an email address, first name, last name, title, company, all of those details, then the subscription rate is going to be very low. So we always tell people, ask for the minimum necessary on your sign-up forms to do good marketing. But the minimum necessary is never just an email address. Why? Because you need to personalize emails for success. So the absolute minimum necessary in any situation is email and first name. And there's almost no subscription rate difference between asking for just an email address or an email address plus a first name. But there is a huge difference in the read and click-through rates in emails that do not personalize. So the more personalized your emails are, or not the more personalized. For instance, saying Dear Andrea Hill is not more effective than saying Dear Andrea. But if you personalize your emails, you're going to be significantly more effective. So at least an email address and a first name. Now, if you do very regional marketing, it's hard to get people to give you an address, but it's easy to get them to give you a zip code. So you could ask for, if you really, really were betting the bank on regional marketing, then ask for email address, first name, zip code. So be very strategic, but never ask for less than a first name in addition to that email address. The next thing you want to do is tell them what they need to do next and what to expect. So if they signed up for sale notifications, then point them to the closeout section of your website in your welcome email. If they signed up to hear about events or gatherings, tell them about fun things happening at your business or point them to your calendar page. But tell them what to do next. It helps them to remember why they signed up for the email list in the first place. Thank you gifts are always appreciated, and it does not have to be a discount or a piece of jewelry. And honestly, I don't like it when people send out discounts as the welcome. That starts training people, I should get a discount every time I get an email. Now, it could be an invitation to, if you're a retailer, to come in and get your ring cleaned. Or if you're a studio jeweler, sometimes studio jewelers will do that. And it gives you an opportunity to inspect something and then offer suggestions for updating. But it could be something really simple. If you're a B2B seller, it could be a white paper that you found from, somebody online that you think is really beneficial. It could be a link to a song that makes your heart sing or a beautiful picture that you think will make their day. It could be any number of thoughtful things. Just make sure it's consistent with your brand story and your message. You should also ask them in that first welcome email to follow you on social media. This is the time when they're most likely to opt into your social media. And this last one may seem counterintuitive, but you need to make the unsubscribe button super obvious on this first welcome email. The fastest way to build trust with people is to be totally transparent. And recipients are always appreciative of knowing that if they want to opt out, they can. In fact, there's an inverse relationship between making unsubscription easy and the actual unsubscription rate. As long as they know they can, they have a tendency to not work too hard to do it. And of course, somebody who's going to unsubscribe no matter what, somebody who hates email, even if they asked you, even if they said, "Oh, why didn't I know that you guys were going to be at such and such show?" Well, you weren't on my email list. And then they give you their card so that they can be notified next time. And then the first time you email them, they unsubscribe. This has happened to me. Can you tell it's a real example? Um, it- you can control unsubscribes by being relevant and meaningful, but you can't control all the unsubscribes. So just don't take them personally. Now, I imagine you already know about drip campaigns, but I'm going to run you through the basics of them just to make sure that everyone in this webinar shares the same information. And we're going to talk about what benefits they can bring your business. In fact, I'm really curious, just in the chat bar, can you let me know if you already know, like, tell me yes if you feel like you really understand drip campaigns and you've used them before. Let me see who's done that. I'm just getting no's. All right. So this is an example of basic drip campaign logic. Okay, we do have some people doing drip campaigns. Good. So you receive an email subscription, and then you send a series of emails, each one of them spaced out with a timer. Now, the benefit of this is that you can pre-plan your email communications to subscribers, and then you can have the confidence that every subscriber gets an instant welcome and that they'll continue to be communicated with for several days or weeks or even months without you having to remember to do anything. It does take time to plan out the campaign and to write each of the emails and do the initial setup. But once you complete that planning work, it's like having a marketing assistant to keep up with your customer communications. Most email systems today are designed to facilitate drip campaigns. So that diagram on the slide is just an example of a drip campaign flow. But there's a better way to do it. An even more powerful way of setting up a drip campaign is to use logic to encourage responses based on customer behavior. So what does that mean? Well, it means sending different emails automatically depending on what the customer does in response to the first communication. So say you receive an email subscription. You either entered it manually because you got it at a trade event, or somebody came in through a sign up form. So you send them the welcome email. Well, if the customer opens the email and reads it, then you could respond with more promotion perhaps. But what if the customer doesn't open it and read it? Well, then maybe you want to respond with something that's entertaining, some eye candy that helps capture their attention so then you can send them promotion and draw them closer to the brand. So maybe that's a video that you send them. At each step, what you're doing is evaluating the customer's behavior and then sending a response designed to either move the customer in the direction you want them to go or to respond to their interest with additional promotion. So there are all these yes, no gates. So I sent them the email. Did they open it? Yes or no? If yes, I'm going to wait 2 days and then I'm going to send them a special offer. Did they open that special offer? Yes or no? Well, if they didn't, then maybe I'll send them that promotional video, try to get them back enthused about the brand. But if they did open it, maybe now it's time to send them, some kind of a promotional catalog or promotional offer. And by promotional, I don't mean discount. I mean promoting your products or promoting your services. And then there's another yes, no gate. Some of these drip campaigns can go on for a very long time. It sort of depends on the expense of the thing you're selling. So the more expensive the thing you're selling, the more communications you need to sell it. So a $20 item may not need more than 3 or 4 steps in a drip campaign. But an $8,000 service or a $10,000 item, you should plan on communicating over a good period of time to get that person in line with what you're trying to get them to do. And obviously, you're going to be testing these things over time. So, once you set up a drip campaign with Logic, and it takes some time to set this up, but then you might go in and say, oh, wow, my send special offer. So after people respond by opening the welcome email and they read it, I want to go in and do a test on that send special offer. I'm going to do an A/B split there. And you're going to update components of your drip strategy over time and learn more and more about what works and what doesn't. So you're sending email, you're observing customer behavior. Did they read? Did they click? Did they click more than one thing? Though you don't want to put too many clicks in an email in most cases, because then they get distracted and don't do picture yourself like a shepherd, and you're trying to guide all of your sheep through a bridge. Now, there's a river. I need to get them from one field to the next field. I'm herding them into a bridge so I can get them to the next place. Well, if I've got way too many clicks and way too many things they can do, then my customers are going to be all over the place and I can't herd them anymore. So you're observing customer behavior, you're responding accordingly, and this is all automated. Now, if you're using a more sophisticated system like a Greenrope or a HubSpot or an Infusionsoft, then you can even use some customer responses like clicking on a certain link to trigger an alert to a salesperson to call the customer. So now you've extended your email drip campaign beyond the email and you've turned it into a sales tool. Using drip campaigns with Logic will help you expand your capacity to market. And if you combine it with testing, it's going to make your marketing better and better over time. When you use a drip campaign with Logic, like I'm describing here, that's marketing automation. People mistakenly cause everything to do with sophisticated email, like this basic drip campaign. They're calling it marketing automation, and it's true, each email is automated, but it's only truly marketing automation when you use Logic to drive more relevant, useful responses. Now, I promised you some resources at the beginning of this session, and we're just about out of time, except for leaving 10 minutes to answer questions. But here are some fun resources that you can use. So the first two are publishing tools. If you're not super comfortable with your writing skills and you don't have the budget or inclination to hire a copywriter, or if you're comfortable with your writing skills but you're always trying to get better, I write professionally and I still love both of those tools, because sometimes you just get busy and you dash off a communication, and really it would be useful to stop and think about it for a couple of minutes first. So Hemingway is a tool that it's a paid tool. It's not a free tool, but it's very inexpensive. And Don't Hit Publish are just two. I use Hemingway as a way to improve my writing. And I use Don't Hit Publish as sort of an editor to just check the highlines of things that we're sending. So those are really good tools. You can go to thesaurus.com anytime, but there is another free thesaurus that I think is much better, and it's called the One Look Thesaurus. And so you can find that one at that link. I think the HubSpot blog is a fabulous tool for anyone who's doing direct marketing. HubSpot can be pricey. It's too expensive for a lot of smaller businesses. And it comes with a tremendous amount of tools that if you're not going to use all of them, I wouldn't spend the money. I think it's an amazing direct marketing tool, but it is pricey. But everyone should read the HubSpot blog, and it is free. And then there's a nice little primer on marketing automation that we found online. And so I'm sharing that with you in that automation link. So those are some tools that I think will be useful for you. So that is what I wanted to share with you today about email. And now I'm going to switch this over so I'm looking at you again, and I will try to actually be looking at you and not just at all these multiple screens. Let me change my layout here. And I want to start answering questions. So if you've got some questions, post them. Please post them in the question area as opposed to in the chat box. It's just a little easier for me to keep track of. So what kinds of questions do you have for me? I will start by asking you a question, which was first, was that helpful? And you can answer this in the chat box. So was this helpful information for you? And also, did you learn something new? Okay, good. So now what kinds of questions do you have? And do you want me to go back to any of these slides that I showed you initially? And if I saw somebody can't find the question box, that's fine. Some mobile devices make it really hard. But so feel free to post the question in the chat box if you can't find the question box. Okay, so somebody wants to see that last slide, the links. Okay, that's up. Okay, so Libby's asking if I have any resources for analyzing emails. Yes, but I cannot remember it off the top of my head. So I'm going to make a note. If I had a pen, you would think having a pen would be a priority for me. Okay, so resource for analyzing emails. I will find it and give it to Kristen so she can send it out in an email to the attendees. And it's not so much a resource for analyzing email as it is a resource for analyzing writing. Hemingway and Don't Hit Publish will both do a little of that, but there are some other ones that get more analytical. Now, if you're talking about a resource for analyzing email performance, no, there's not really a good tool for that because so much of it is dependent on industry, customer group, device, all of that. Okay, I see the word bounce list. Do you mean bounces? And do you mean you want some information about bounces? A little more information so I don't start answering the wrong thing. Because I could just start carrying on and it wouldn't be what you wanted to hear about. So what were you looking for on when you posted bounce lists? Oh, so it's a tool you used with MailChimp? Well, you got me there. I'm not familiar with it. So, hey, that's a good thing to look into. No, it's not a tool you used with MailChimp? I really do wish in these webinars I could eventually turn on the sound so everyone could talk because that would make your lives easier, wouldn't it? It's separate from MailChimp. So you, is it an analysis tool? Just checking to see if anyone else has questions about the content. Okay, it's an analysis tool. Well, thanks for sharing it. So Bounceless, I'm going to go look into it. And I imagine some of the rest of you are as well. Oh, it takes away spam. Okay, cool. So I keep asking if any of the rest of you have questions, but do also any of the rest of you have suggestions? Well, it looks like you guys got your questions answered for the moment. That's either a good sign or a bad one. I'm not sure which. Hopefully, it's a good sign. And that is all that I had for you today. So we are going to, I think this was our last, Chris, Kristen, was this our last webinar of the season or do we have one more? I think it might be our last. We are doing an MJSA mini confab on October the 24th. It's going to be in Chicago this time. It's going to be presented at this in the same space and at the same time as the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference, Responsible Gem and Jewelry Boutique. Okay, we do have one more webinar coming up on October 31st, which will be announced. And Kristen says so nicely, we are putting the finishing touches on our 2020 schedule. And what that means is I have continued to fail to send her the descriptions for the sessions we agreed on for like 3 weeks. So I'm late on that, but that'll be up soon. So we do have a whole 2020 series planned, but also please plan on coming to Confab on the 24th in Chicago, and you'll be able to shop at the Gem and Jewelry Boutique, the Responsible Gem and Jewelry Boutique, and get some great content. I'll be presenting, and Sarah Yude from JVC will be presenting, and Donna DeLucia will be presenting on selling. She's a powerhouse salesperson that just has some great content to share on channeling your inner salesperson, even if you don't know you have one. So that's October the 24th, another webinar on the 31st. And yes, Libby, we can send out. So Kristen, can we include mini confab information in the email that we send out today? Okay, cool. We will do that. So thanks everyone for your time. I so appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules. And let me and or Kristen know if you need any other information from this session or if you have any suggestions for future sessions. And with that, I will bid you adieu. Have a great afternoon. Bye.